But Grissom was also an outspoken critic of the space program and was quoted as saying, "Someone's going to get killed." Unfortunately, Grissom's worst fears were soon realized. On January 27, 1967, 2 years before the first moon landing, Grissom and his crew boarded the Apollo 1 capsule for a full-scale simulation. The problems began almost immediately. First, the capsule's communication systems failed.
You copy? No, I didn't read your Chuck at all. I can't read your Chuck. You want to try the phone? How do I get the moon? We can't pass between 3 buildings. I can't hear a thing you're saying.
Suddenly, the capsule burst into flames with the astronauts sealed inside. Tragically, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee lost their lives before ever leaving the launch pad. Thomas Ronald Barron was a safety inspector during Apollo 1's construction. After the fire, Barron testified before Congress that the Apollo program was in such disarray that the United States would never make it to the moon. He claimed his opinions made him a target.
Has there been any pressure on you by NASA?
Nothing. We were, my wife and I were somewhat harassed at home when this first thing broke some time back, but it's gone away now.
As part of his testimony, Barron submitted a 500-page report detailing his findings.
It was the real fear that the program could be stopped dead in its tracks.
Then exactly 1 week after he testified, Barron's car was struck by a train. Barron, his wife, and stepdaughter were killed instantly.
I believe that Thomas Ronald Barron was murdered because he had the truth to tell about the Apollo project.
Barron's report mysteriously disappeared, and to this day, it has never been found. Between 1964 and 1967, a total of 10 astronauts lost their lives in freak accidents. These deaths accounted for an astonishing 15% of NASA's astronaut corps.
To keep something that's alive wrapped up and covered over, you've got to eliminate all the people that can talk about it.
NASA's highest-ranking official, James Webb, resigned without explanation just days before the first Apollo mission. Why, when he was on the threshold of achieving the greatest accomplishment of his career? All 3 Apollo 11 astronauts also resigned shortly after their return. Color television pictures that the crew of Apollo 11 brought a high-resolution color video camera with them on their mission. Yet the only pictures broadcast live from the moon's surface were these from a low-definition black and white camera. In fact, the networks complained because in addition to this, they were forced to shoot the images, second generation, off of a projection TV of the technology of 30 years ago, and were not even allowed to take a direct feed, which further degraded the quality and clarity of the images. From an analytical standpoint, photographic anomalies have to be sought out with an understanding of lighting and shadows. The most straightforward is simple. When objects are lit solely by the sun, as all the scenes on the moon were said to be, after all, lighting equipment was not only impractical, it was unnecessary in bright sunlight, then all shadows, regardless of the landscape, will run parallel with one another and never intersect, as shown by this example. In these seldom seen photographs, obtained from a rarely used auxiliary NASA archival site, it is clear that these scenes were lit with artificial light. These shadows, which are cast at different angles, are evidence that a second light source is being used. In addition, the sun would not cause an isolated hotspot like this, only an artificial light would. Again, intersecting shadows and another hotspot. And again. And again. In this magnification of an Apollo photograph, a rock, very likely a papier-mâché prop because of the crease here, is categorized with the letter C. In later releases of the same picture, the letter is gone, probably airbrushed out.
On the moon, the astronauts' only source of light was the sun.
They had no extra lighting, no flashes or things like that.
Yet in this photograph from Apollo 14, the shadows are cast in different directions, suggesting multiple light sources.
The shadows cast by the rocks in the foreground should have been east-west, like the LEM shadows.
And in this photo from Apollo 17, again the shadows are pointing in different directions.
Outside in sunlight, shadows always run parallel with one another, so the shadows will never intersect.
Conspiracy theorists say it's not just the shadows that indicate the use of additional lights, but what has been photographed in the shadows. For example, here's an astronaut who descends into a huge shadow cast by the lunar module. Yet his entire body is still visible. How is it that he is not shrouded in darkness? Here's the same maneuver from another Apollo mission. Again, the astronaut is brightly lit in what is obviously dark shadow. And in this picture, the sun is directly behind the astronaut. His figure should be a silhouette. Yet even the smallest characteristics of his suit are recognizable.
It seems like he's standing in the spotlight. And I can't explain that. That escapes me. Why?
And finally, in this picture with the sun behind the lunar module, the front of the craft is clearly visible. The words United States are crisp and clear. How could these backlit pictures be so detailed?
It's because there's more than one light source, which means they're not on the moon.
It has been estimated that as many as 20% of Americans believe we never went to the moon. Is it really possible that NASA deceived the world? According to a former astronaut, it's entirely possible.
Regarding the Apollo mission, I can't say 100% for sure whether these men walked on the moon.
Bill Casing was an analyst and engineer at Rocketdyne, the company that designed the Apollo rockets.
There were many problems that evolved during the 60s that led people to believe that we're never going to make it to the moon.
Casing observed that despite the clarity of deep space, the stars were missing from the black lunar sky. He saw the American flag waving, even though there is no air on the moon. And he discovered that there was no blast crater beneath the lunar lander, where its powerful rocket engine had fired.
The noise level of a rocket engine is up into the 140, 150 decibel range. In other words, enormously loud. How would it be possible to hear astronauts' voices against the background of a running rocket engine?
Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward, drifting to the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
Is this evidence that the footage is actually fake? A sequence shot in a controlled environment here on Earth? Just months before this historic landing, a prototype LEM was flight tested at Ellington Air Force Base. While NASA cameras record the test flight, Neil Armstrong struggles to control the unwieldy craft. Then, at approximately 300 feet, the lander flies wildly out of control. At the last second, Armstrong ejects. And floats to safety. If the lander was so unstable and difficult to fly in the controlled environment of Earth, then how could the LEM land 6 times flawlessly in the alien environment of the moon?
The LEM had a single engine mounted dead center, and then they had little push jets, thruster jets, a couple of them up on top. This was supposed to control their attitude as they came down. Well, I'll tell you a secret. The instant you moved your tail in that cabin an inch, you would change the load pattern, it would begin to tilt, and it would start that thing spinning.
The fact that there's no blast crater under the LEM is one of the most conclusive pieces of evidence that I find supporting the hoax.
In fact, no sign of a blast crater is visible for any of the 6 lunar landings. Yet NASA's own scientific illustrations clearly depict a blast crater.
Then there's one other point. If they had truly landed on the moon, this dust would have then descended on the lunar lander, on the foot pads, and we find not a trace of dust on the foot pads. In the footage of the ascent stage going up, what you don't see is an exhaust plume coming out of the rocket engine nozzle.
What a ride, what a ride.
But what do we see? We see the ascent stage suddenly pop up without any exhaust plume whatsoever, as though it were jerked up by a cable.
It's absolutely unreal.
Although it appears that the astronauts are moving in the moon's gravity, which is 1/6 that of the Earth, Percy notes that when the speed of the film is doubled, the astronauts appear to be running as if in Earth's gravity. Ground discrepancies are also apparent in the lunar video.
The best evidence are some pictorial anomalies in the photographic record of the trip to the moon. There is one for Apollo 16 where the same shot, the same hill, appears in 2 different days.
This tape was shot on what was reported to be the first of Apollo 16's lunar excursions.
But it couldn't pick a better spot.
And this video was from the next day at a different location.
It is the most beautiful sight.
NASA claims the second location was 2.5 miles away. But when one video is superimposed over the other, the locations appear identical. For reference, crosshairs were permanently etched into the lunar cameras, so they would have to appear on top of every image. But in this photo, a crosshair is behind a part of the lunar rover.
This situation is impossible and has to be the result of technical manipulation and doctoring of the image.
And in this photo from Apollo 11, the equipment in the foreground is covering the crosshair, not behind it. And in another from Apollo 12, the American flag is covering one crosshair, and the astronaut is covering the other.
We'll have a lovely afternoon, kiss the world goodbye, and away we'll fly. Destination moon. We'll travel fast as a light till we're out of sight. The earth will be like a toy balloon. Oh, what a thrill you'll get riding on my jet, a destination moon. Oh, we'll go up, 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 straight to the moon we two, high in the starry blue. I'll be out of this world with you, so away we'll steal in my space mobile, a supersonic, a honeymoon. Leave your cares below, pull the switch, let's go. A destination moon. Too. We'll be high in the starry blue. I'll be out of this world with you. So away we'll steal in my jetmobile, a supersonic honeymoon. Leave your cares below, pull that switch, let's go. Destination, we're flying high up in the sky. Destination moon.